Hi, it's Karen from Feisty Feathers. I wanted to try to make a video today, see how well it goes with the whole editing process. I'm not super great at videos, so we'll see how this goes. This is Loki. That's Lando back there. So today I wanted to talk about suspended cages and why breeders use suspended cages. Suspended cages are basically cages that are up on legs. And the reason breeders in particular use suspended cages is the same reason your cages come with a floor grate. It's to keep birds from accessing their poop. So what we do is, all the feces and food and stuff that they don't eat, it falls through the bottom, and then we can just sweep it up or hose it off. I've got 6 big suspended cages. I use them for quarantine. I use them for breeding ringnecks. I've used them for breeding green cheeks. They're nice big cages, but the birds can't get to stuff on the floor, and that's the most sanitary way to keep your birds, is so they can't access stuff on the floor. Hey, sweetie. One thing that a lot of people use for the smaller species is walk-in flights. You do that just because with smaller birds like budgies, cockatiels, lovebirds, you tend to have a lot of birds together in one area, so you use a big walk-in flight. It's not as sanitary. There's no way it could ever be as sanitary, even if you clean it. I'm going to try to splice in a picture of one of my flights that was cleaned just yesterday, and it doesn't matter how often you clean them, there's always going to be some poop on the floor or some food. So they'll never be quite as sanitary, and that's actually one of the problems with the smaller species, is they can have a lot of little random diseases. If you buy a budgie, cockatiel, or a lovebird, they're known to be more susceptible to certain diseases. That's actually not true. It's not like they're more susceptible or they're disease factories or anything. It's just that the way that they're normally housed in large groups, you have lots of birds together, which increases the likelihood of disease. And then you also have a walk-in flight, which means everybody can get to everybody else's poop. It's not as sanitary. And so you see more issues with stuff like psittacosis. What are the others? Megabacteria. There's lots of little nasty diseases that those birds are known for getting just because they're kept that way. So the floor grate in your bird's cage is there for a reason. Back when I first got into birds in the early 90s, hey, Missy, bird cages didn't have floor grates. And I still have an old California cage because it was a great brand and the cages last forever. My California cage is rather small, and it's been sitting outside for like 20 years, and there's no rust on it at all. But I can't use it because it doesn't have a floor grate. I've used it on occasion when I had to, but like you really want a grate to be there so your birds can't access their droppings. And one of the things I've seen recently is this movement for people to put like a newspaper or something on the floor grate so that their birds don't hurt their feet. Your bird doesn't care. They'll walk on the grate. It doesn't hurt their feet, and they have this magical ability to like move up and sit somewhere else if they're uncomfortable. So you don't need to worry about putting stuff on top of the grate so that they can walk on it. That defeats the whole purpose of the grate. It's there so they can't touch their poop. Because birds poop everywhere. You don't want them to be able to touch their poop. So yeah, don't put stuff on top of the floor grate. You want stuff to fall through the floor grate. Another question I get a lot is, where I see a lot online, is what do you put in the bottom of the cage for substrate? I used to use, back in the day, I used newspaper, which once you reach a certain number of birds becomes a pain because you just can't get newspaper fast enough. And the sheets are also not large enough. So if you're still sticking with newspaper, I highly recommend you move to packing paper. You can get a gigantic bundle on Amazon for like 30 bucks. The sheets are like 3 feet by 2 feet or something really big, which is great for large cages. You can cut it down for smaller cages. I switched to packing paper, and it's been so much better to not have to worry about scavenging for newspapers. So I switched to the packing paper a few years ago when we moved, and I'm like, hey, this stuff is great, and it's cheap. And you can see the poops because, you know, the paper is like whitish or beige. So if you want to track poops, it's also easier to see that way. Anyway, so I switched to that. And then earlier this year, I was looking for a new nest box, or actually floor substrate for weaning cages. Because when you have weaning babies, they flap all the time because they're strengthening their wing muscles in preparation for flight. And if you use pine shavings, they go everywhere. And you can't use just paper with weaning babies because they're still on hand feeding formula, which means their poops are basically liquid. So they will squirt all over the bottom of the cage, and it just, paper doesn't cut it. I'm sure Lori, people have that issue too because they got squirty poops. So you need something more absorbent than paper. So I was using pine shavings, which just get blown everywhere when the babies flap their wings. So, hey, yes. So I had another breeder recommend pine pellets, which I'd never heard of. Apparently it's an equine bedding. You can get it at Tractor Supply. $5 for like a giant bag of pine pellets. And you don't even need that much because as they absorb stuff, they break apart and they kind of spread out. So you only need a very loose layer. You don't even have to cover the whole floor of the cage. They work great. They don't scatter to the wind when your birds flap. The pine smell is nice. Birds don't usually have a lot of scent. Their cages shouldn't smell, but it does help cut down on the little smell there is, especially if you have like birds who take baths and stuff and get everything all wet. It's absorbent, but it doesn't seem to grow mold. Like I don't recommend stuff like corncob bedding because it grows mold and it's gross. But with the pine pellets, they don't seem to have that problem. Of course, I'm in California, which is a kind of arid region. It might be different if you live in a humid place. But they work great for me here. And I've switched basically all my cages that have paper, like all my weaning cages, my pet cages, I've switched to pine pellets. And it's great. I don't have to change them as often because the poops get absorbed. And so instead of changing paper like, every other day, I'm changing like once every week or so, or you can also spot clean, just change out the pellets in the spot that's most frequently getting pooped on. Lando here in particular, there's like 2 places in his cage that have poop. He doesn't poop anywhere else. It's just those 2 places. So they get dirty rather quickly, but the rest of the cage stays clean. So you can do spot cleaning on the tray with the pine pellets. But that's basically what I wanted to say. You want suspended cages. So when you see, I see stuff online. Whenever someone shows pictures of a breeder facility, people don't know what they're looking at. And, they see rows and rows of suspended cages, and they're like, oh my gosh, what is this person doing? They don't look anything like pet cages. They're not supposed to. They're designed for breeding birds. They're designed to be, they're usually designed to allow flight. They're longer rather than tall. And they have floor grates so that all the poop and stuff goes out. We're really into functionality as breeders. You want the best system possible to keep your birds clean and healthy, so that they get enough exercise. There's a reason we do things the way we do. It's not just random. And aviculture has come a long way since I started, and certainly since the days back when we actually imported birds. Things are a lot better now. So that's it. I'll go back and edit this thing, and hopefully we'll have pictures of the suspended cages I have. Yes. Thanks for following, or thanks for watching.